Welcome to the Pink Room, a space for real talk by real women about the real issues of our day.
As minorities, we're not only your day laborers. We're not only the ones that clean your houses or your hotels, right? We are human beings that have capacity to be part of every area of this country.
So the strategy needs to be to get into these political offices.
Every election, every seat, every office.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And Teresa, if I would just like to say, I don't consider myself a minority. If the world wants to see us as minorities, because we are actually the majority, but if they want to see us as minorities, then call us the super minority.
There you go. Okay. Yeah.
People started to post some microaggressions that they were experiencing from their professors.
Wow.
And hearing so many perspectives, they're like, you have to do something. If I have the resource, I'll do well as well. I'll do well just as well as others do. Don't make things easier for me. I just want the resource. That's all. And I think that's the misconception, that they think that we want handouts. We don't want handouts. We just want what the others get. That's it. Give us what you give others, and we will do just as well.
Excellent. Ashley.
As long as you can ensure that one group of people in this country have access to good education,
right,
another group does not have access to adequate education, right, you basically guarantee that the group that has less access to good education, then remain the sickest people in our system. And so you have the conflation of several policies, or the absence of policies, that basically create and sustain the perfect storm in this country.
That's not where your affirmation is going to come from.
Right.
Humans fail us all the time. It is not in someone else. You can't find in someone else what you cannot find first within yourself. And what entryways were there for someone else to come in and feed you false narratives? You have to build up those fortresses first. And when I say fortresses, I don't mean walls to block people out. I mean confidence within yourself to know that you can look in the mirror and say to the mirror, Latoya, you are loved. I love you. I love you. You are beautiful.
Start your watch parties. Cast the Pink Room on your HD TVs. Post your comments in the chat. This space is yours too.
Welcome to Pink Room number 12. My name is Norca Blackman Richards, and we're so very excited to be with you today. We have a special announcement that we want to make. First, we want to give a thank you. We want to give a shout out to Dr. Harrigan and his congregation, the Ebenezer Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Sandra Joseph, who invited us in the month of October or November to host a Pink Room at their afternoon program for women. It was fantastic. We had a great time, and we just want to send a shout out to them. Thank you for your invitation, and we hope we can do this again. We want to quickly invite you to an event that we will be having very soon. And this event is our 5th International Leadership Summit. For Real Women International celebrates its 14th anniversary this year in January. And we have our 5th International Leadership Summit, where all the women who do the grassroots work for Real Women International gather. This will take place from the 15th to the 18th. We're having a bonus night on January 14th. Our guest presenters and speakers will be Dr. Fiona Lewis, who's a plant-based chef. She's going to talk to us a little bit about self-care, nurturing, how to eat well. Then we have Professor Denise Miller, a professional development trainer and personal life strategies. And we also have Layla Victorine, a speech pathologist, pediatrician speech pathologist, and artist. She will be with us also. And our main guest speaker, Anna Gabriel is known as Anna G. She's a super world champion of the super welterweight division of the World Boxing Association. 10 years undefeated. Her story is amazing. Cannot wait to hear from her. She's into a global self-defense movement for women, does fantastic work for women and girls, and is very excited about being with us. We still have room. We have put there the link. You can register for the summit. Registration ends on January 10th. The cost going forward is $50. We invite you to go to our website and register as soon as possible. So let me now bring on my co-hostesses as we go into Pink Room number 13, Dr. Susan Moore. Say her name. But before we go into that, we want to talk a little bit about 2020. We were not able to necessarily wrap up 2020 with a review of the year. So we want to now share with you the lessons that we learned from 2020 and how these lessons of 2020, what do we take with us after a review of the full year? And what are some of the things that we want to leave with you going forward into 2021? So we're going to ask Tricia to start.
Hi, everybody. I missed you, Pink Room ladies. It's really nice to be back. 2020, as we all know, was an extraordinary year. I think one of the lessons that I learned is that priorities can change. Sometimes we think that we do things a certain way because we have to. I have to go to this conference. I have to travel. I have to study. All these things we thought we had to do. And then came COVID and we realized that we couldn't do them, even when we thought we had to. So priorities can change, and we are the ones who can decide how to change those. It shouldn't take a pandemic for us to be able to take a really close look at our lives, at our dreams, at our goals, and then decide what things we need to keep and what things we need to discard in order for us to keep moving forward. That's one lesson.
Thank you, Tricia. Shonda.
Happy New Year, everyone. It's good to be back in the Pink Room. It's a powerful place and space for women. So we're going to keep on going with this. So one of the lessons that I learned, that I'll just encompass it, having multiple losses, immediate losses in my family, and not specific to COVID, but extremely close together, like within a week, throughout the year, 5 deaths in total that were really close to me, a whole lot. But I realized through all of that in 2020, against all of the pandemic and all of the above, because I still have life, I realized that each breath of life is an opportunity for better health, happiness, and wisdom. Getting to learn my own body, what makes me happy, working with my gut, and just recognizing how powerful we are as women, especially through this pandemic, through the politics, through all of this stuff. But knowing that that one breath of life is always an opportunity to continue towards my purpose on earth. So glad to be back, and hope you all can apply some of those things to in 2021.
Thank you, Shonda. Teresa.
Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. So excited to start off with something that is so my heart to all of the women that are on this in this Pink Room. Pink Room has come to be something that has left me with a lot of lessons, and I think one of the lessons that I've learned throughout the year, and thanks to stations we had within Pink Room, has been that the importance of not taking a victim mentality comes to my health, the health, not just for somebody, and save us, or for a vaccine to come and save us. That we have to be I have to be very protective when it comes to my health and the health of my family. So for me, that's been incredibly, important to learn throughout this year is to just be very much informed, and also just work in the direction of being a healthier person, and because that's the powerful tool that I have in my hands. The cavalry's not coming, so I need to make sure everything that's in my power that I can do for myself and for those that are.
Thank you, Teresa. I think that for me, 2020 definitely left the idea that change is necessary and it is mandatory, and we can never be satisfied. I think that oftentimes as women, as people of color, as a society, we think things will never change. So let's just try to accommodate ourselves within the confines of the boxes. I think that the revelations of 2020 in all the different pandemics, health, race, economic, domestic violence, it was clear to me that more voices need to unite to be lifted. More change needs to occur. There's no such thing as being set in stone. So because it is set in stone, then that means that it cannot change. For example, in religious traditions, people feel that, well, this is the way it has always been and that's it. No, things need to change for the better. So for me, there was a lesson in 2020. For me, it was that change is mandatory. Change is necessary. Change must always happen for progress to occur. We cannot be satisfied and we cannot be stagnant. I don't know if any one of you has any final words you want to share before we go into our news of women in the world. Okay, great. So we're going to go into.
We have a lot of ground to cover. Let's go.
We're going to go into a segment that we're calling News of Women in the World. And we're going to start with Tricia is going to talk to us a little bit about vaccine and the controversies around that. Tricia, the time is yours.
Thank you. So I think that one of the things that we've seen the most noise about is the vaccines, the ones that have been approved, the ones that are coming down the line. And I think that what has caught my attention the most is the amount of conspiracy theories that have been generated just by not just the virus, but now also the vaccines. And I don't want to go into them themselves. It's just the fact that there have been so many. And sometimes you want to wonder where they're generating from, right? Because if you want to plant seeds of doubt, sometimes you just infiltrate the territory of the ones who you want to doubt. And sometimes I wonder how random these theories are, precisely because those of us who need protection from this virus the most are the ones that are the least amenable to taking the vaccine. So I just would like to encourage everybody to read for yourself, and not just read what you feel comfortable reading, what you're used to reading, or what you can understand without thinking a little, right? Apply yourself and try to find out for yourself what these things mean. Nobody should take this decision without having enough information in order to make the decision. Number one. And number two, this idea of wait and see is a little bit, it's understandable, but at the same time, it's like, I'll wait for all of you all to die, and then I'll decide if I take it. And that's not the point of the vaccine either, right? So the interest, and for me, especially women, have been generating and propagating a lot of these controversies in regards to the vaccine. So that's the one that I've been noticing the most.
Wow. Thank you for that. Shonda, what's new on the Breonna Taylor update?
Well, 22 was a powerful year for Brianna. We know that she was erased until the death of George Floyd, and then you heard a lot of her thereafter, and we know a lot of the pandemic. So I personally have not stopped thinking about her and why. It's just like speaking of her, when we say her name, Breonna Taylor, it's like justice for all of the other Black women, brown women, women of color who have been murdered by police and in other institutions and people in authoritative positions, and they do not get the recognition. And so this particular piece that I bring to you to start off the new year is not to rejoice, but to recognize that just like what Stacey Abrams and just to bring in a little politics has done in Georgia with trying to get justice in terms of, voter suppression. This particular piece with Brianna just shows that the persistence of primarily Black women, brown women, women in general, that justice is happening. We know that in the past, the officer, it took him a while to be fired. What was his name? Detective Brett Hankinson. And now two of the detectives who executed this warrant to invade her home are now on the verge of being fired because of the manner in which they prepared these warrants. And so that means that the justice of Breonna Taylor is going to continue to go on. And I think if we continue to say her name, Breonna Taylor, it represents justice for other women through military deaths, through deaths and rapes, etc. So when you say her name, you recognize justice for all. So that's the latest in the news, and we'll continue to follow that up.
Right. And I found it interesting, Sean, apparently they now find out that they were lying.
Yes.
Lied about supposedly been told by the post office that packages were being delivered there. So now all of that has come to light.
Exactly.
Yeah. So another very important aspect of this, how lies, right? The untruth was used to, her death was senseless. And this again goes to prove that, right? So
Yes,
hopefully.
yes. And definitely, sorry, Norka, just to continue cover-ups and the lies when you just choose to erase, murder, and rid people, especially because of how powerful we are, it's wrong. And so, yes, they lied about their informant, their information, and this is nothing new. This has been happening since days of antiquity, and it continues. But we're going to keep pushing and fighting for these things to stop. And if they don't stop, we're just going to keep making noise. We're going to be like that little fly in somebody's ear at night.
Yes.
Right. Teresa, tell us about Hilaria Baldwin and WW84.
Yes. Oh my goodness. So much news this week on women, and we just had to bring this up, a little bit of pop culture, but I think that it comes to show the way society, treats women. And so this up. You might know what's already happening, but turns out that a woman who is, a woman seeing as a woman with, Spanish heritage, or that she was from Spain, and happens to be married to, an actor by the name of Ellen. Anyway, the point that I want to bring up is amount of, I'm not here to point out what she did. I'm not now if now I what my opinion is about what she did. What I'm here to share with you is the vast amount of finger pointing that has gone on since this broke out, and this woman has just continually been bombarded by everyone, and not only the news media outlets, but social media has just gone on around. All you have to do is look, just typing, and you will find, numerous videos of people who have taken the time to, chew this woman out. And when and I want this up because I've always, as a woman, I've experienced, if I make a mistake, and a man makes the same mistake as I do, and this is maybe I'm going to blow this a little bit out of proportion. I think it's the same foundation. When when a man cheats on his wife, guys are like that. That's just, boys will be boys, right? Woman, her on her husband, on her man, she's a this, she's a that, and I have my perception whole issue. Again, I'm not saying that what she did was wrong. That's wrong. That's not the point. I just bring to light that this woman is scrutinized in a way that I don't and would be nice. And it goes to show, because you have people that are in power who are incredibly corrupt and are lying, and have been double lie stuff, and then they look, people a big deal out of it, and it's just mind blowing. And I think as women, we need to be not only mindful that when we read things, conscious of the fact that we not be pulled into that. And whatever this woman did, if it was right or wrong, she's going to pay the consequences of what she did, obviously. However, I think that as a society, we have such a double standard. The WW4 for those of you who have young adults at home, is the Wonder Woman 84 movie that dropped in for Christmas Day. I'm really into reading about movies. I enjoy reading what other people, like critics, have to say about different types of movies, especially the way I see that have women in their lead. And one of the articles that came up that I ran across this week was talking about how this movie, who is starred women, a woman, which is something very rare. Obviously, normally the superheroes that we are male, and that the director also a woman, and so they were really going at this movie and not trying to compare it to what men directors and men character leads, how they were really going at the message of this movie, and for I don't want to give out any spoilers, but it does have a message, and I think, I already watched it. I happen to think that there's a very, very good points that our society should take up, especially for a lot of the men in our society, to kind of just think about what this movie is trying to share, what message they're trying to share. So I just wanted to kind of give you guys what's happening. And this is a 21st century. We are in, super advanced technological, we have so many to be proud of as humanity, as an entire world. However, we still continue to put women this women professionals at a higher standard than men. You have to basically be Wonder Woman in order for anybody to even value your work. So that was just kind of the two things that I was very much in tune with this week, and hoping that or we put this information out there, the more people will be aware of what they read and how they take in information. So with that, I thank you. That was our popular news for the week.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Teresa. On my part, I wanted to, very important point that Teresa mentions about the fact that the double standard, that women are basically scrutinized way more differently and scrutinized more than men. I wanted for us to talk a little bit on this segment about the situation that occurred here in New York. I've chosen to highlight the mother of the young man that went through this particular situation. This young man is the son of a Grammy award-winning jazz musician. He's a trumpeter who has worked with the likes of Beyonce, Jay-Z, and many artists. He and his son came to New York for Christmas. He was doing some work. Went to bed late, decided to get up in the morning to go have brunch, step out of the elevator, and this woman immediately accuses this 14-year-old boy of stealing her iPhone. Now, this is a posh hotel. This is what you call one of those boutique hotels. So you know that the patrons in that hotel are of a certain class or can pay a certain amount of money. So this young man comes out of the elevator with his father. This woman proceeds to attack him like I say like a cat, like a tiger, jump on him. Father had to intervene, and I wonder what would happen if the father had not been there, accusing him of stealing her cell phone. And the father does something very interesting. He refuses to let the son show her the cell phone, and I totally agree with him. Because he says, first of all, and yes, everybody in America, except for me maybe, a lot of people in America have iPhones. So you don't have to be very special to have an iPhone. Second of all, you have never met this young man. He's just coming out of the elevator. You're assuming because of his race that he stole your iPhone. That alone raises a lot of red flags, right? You don't know him. You haven't spoken to him. He's not been close to you, but you're assuming that he stole your iPhone. Long story short, it so happened that she had left her iPhone in the Uber, Lyft, whatever she had left it at. The driver came back with the iPhone. After she made the scandal in the lobby, accused this young man of stealing her iPhone, virtually attacked the young man. Father had to kind of push her because she scrapped him, and just like a hyena. I think my point here, when I think about it, and his mother, Kat Rodriguez, makes such a passionate appeal when she says, listen, yes, he's tall for his age, but when you hear him speak, this is a kid. And even if he wasn't a kid, you have no right to assume that because he's male and he's black, that you have the right to say that he stole this from you. What happened? The mother said, what happened to guilty, innocent proven guilty? I want to go beyond and say that to me, this is the great example of why racism and bias is a disease. It's a mental disease. It creates mental imbalance, because to think that you are a respectable patron of this hotel will literally attack physically, not only in word, orally, but physically jump and attack another patron, assuming that because of the color of his skin, he stole your iPhone, which every other person in America has. That's a mental disease. That's not normal.
Let me push back. Let me push back because anytime anybody tells me that someone acting a certain way is because they're sick, rubs me the wrong way because I'm a physician. It rubs me the wrong way because being sick makes you not responsible.
Right.
You cannot choose not to cough if you have bronchitis. You cannot choose not to have a fever if you have an infection. You can choose not to jump on this boy just because you decided he stole your iPhone. And the minute we call that anytime, and I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not saying there aren't mentally ill racist people.
Right.
But what I do have to fight against is this idea that people who misbehave is because they're sick. And then that's a disease, because once it's a disease, you're not responsible.
Right.
Even if you commit a crime, if you're mentally ill, you're not responsible. They send you to the psych ward. They don't send you to jail. Right? And it means that you need medicine, medication, therapy, whatever, that is added to you or substance is taken away from you, and when that is done, you're good. And I don't find racism like fitting so nicely into that package.
So listen to me a second. In no way are we saying that we're justifying this action. What I'm saying with it is that it's imbalance.
Oh, I don't disagree.
There's some type of imbalance, be it mentally, spiritual, whatever. It is not normal behavior. And I agree with you that we should not use it to say that they're excused because of this behavior. But there's something deeper in it. Yes, there's a choice. Absolutely. But if I'm a grown woman that I would choose to jump on a kid like a hyena, something is wrong.
But you're not jumping on every kid. And that's why that's where I'm having the problem.
I agree
it's not an issue of boundaries. It's not an issue of confusion.
Right.
That's why I say it's a choice. If you were jumping on every kid, there's something abnormal. You're not jumping on every kid.
No. You're jumping
on a specific kid.
On black kids.
You're jumping on black. And then we read a little bit more and find that months earlier, this lady, whatever, and her mom were caught in another altercation, another scandal that had racist notes to it as well.
Right.
So that more feeds me into the idea of it's normalized and accepted behavior.
So let's go beyond that. Let's look at how we as a society continue to normalize it and continue to cover her. So why isn't this woman's name in the media? Because if it was someone else, the name would go over the media.
Her name's out now.
But not in the same way. It's not in the same way. A while before it got out there, right?
Yes.
She made a statement to CNN, 20 minutes, this anonymous whatever, stating that she was the victim. I don't see how she could have been the victim. I just feel that there's still protection around her whiteness, and it bothers me to no end.
Absolutely.
Because the father was a patron just like her. Now the manager and the hotel have come out excusing themselves, because if you notice the manager's actions in the video, he automatically believed her and proceeded to tell the kid, let me see your iPhone. And the father said, no, that's disrespectful. Absolutely not. Why are you believing her over my son? And I think that this is where, as people of color, we need to stand up to these things. And I so agree with the way the father proceeded, because typically this is what would have happened. The kid would have had to show out the phone, and then, okay, it's not your phone. And then that's it, we go ways. But I think the father insisted, no, he doesn't have to show you the phone. Everyone has, a lot of people have an iPhone. You're not the only one with an iPhone. We're patrons in this hotel. I think that was the right way to proceed with this particular incident. But still, there's a lot of protection around this whiteness, and it really bugs me to no end. I agree with the parents. They need to bring charges because they need to send a message. This is unacceptable behavior.
Norca, I think that it's you can tell it obviously Herbie has had and we didn't know who she was until like almost after. So protected. She is being protected, and it's not because obviously we live in a world where if you do one thing, people will jump immediately, and she's being protected. So people who are angry at what she's done won't get at her, be it on social media and start bullying her, or physically attack her on the street, because that's a problem. But she's being protected because of her color, evidently.
Yeah.
I just show you why justice is just so sorry.
No, go ahead, Shana, go ahead.
It's just to show you how justice, it's not blind. It's not blind. It's hidden in plain sight. Not even hidden. When you look at victims who have been killed by police, and prior to the police killing them, you've had family members trying to literally step in front of the barrel of a gun and say, look, this person has mental illness. Yet and still they murdered them, right? And then instead of them talking about this officer was unprepared or maybe didn't realize it, or, should have called someone else on the scene who could help, the next thing you see in the news is the victim's rap sheet. Or you see the victim's murder. Chart. It's justice is not blind. And this is an exact instance where, and I'm going to look at the media because her name is out there, that she committed a crime. She harassed this kid. She falsely accused him. She attacked him. He is a minor. She should be handcuffed and arrested for attacking him, period. Yet she's still walking around, seen coming out of McDonald's as if she didn't do anything, but clearly it's normal. And yes, she is ill. She is ill, and she's full of the illness of hatred and racism.
That's the disease.
Remember how they
just let me quickly draw something that Sean, that you mentioned this, and the other day I was thinking about this. Many of the times when the police is going to shoot, and as you said, family members, it's usually the mothers, the sister, it's usually the females, the girlfriends getting in the way, trying to protect Black male bodies.
No respect for her value.
No respect. Go ahead, Tricia.
Remember how they used to talk to us about defensive driving? And the principle of it's not you making the mistake, but you have to drive in such a way that you're always aware of who's around you and what driving mistake they could be making, so that you're safe. We live in a world where we have to do defensive living. I have had the two of my eldest boys been questioned in places where we buy things because they're Black. As little boys, not now that they're big, as little boys, 7, 8 years old. And then that means, so now Jonathan, that's 8. Don't put your hands in your pocket. Don't stand too long in any place. Do not touch anything we're not going to buy. You walk where I see you. Can't be running around the store. Defensive living. And what worries me is that all the defensive living is no longer enough. We're going to talk about that with Dr. Moore a little bit later. But right now, just in living, they say driving while Black, living while Black. You can protect your son by being excellent at your craft and making the money to take him out to a holiday in an expensive hotel. He's not walking the street. He's not out there by himself. He's with his father in a rich hotel. And that is not enough protection for him to be attacked by some person and the other person being defended. And what that does to the mothers and the fathers and the children of color in this country, what that does to your health. Talk about mental health. That is where the problem is. Because that is what causes the stress, the hypertension, the diabetes, all the others. Because brain trauma, defensive living, you're defensive living. And that is just, we can't even, what you say, what do I move? We've had this conversation. Do I move? Where do you move to? There's no place in the world that you can move to where you run away from this. Einstein literally asked me this week, Mom, why doesn't anybody like Black people?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
And then you know what he followed that up with? Not even Black people like Black people.
Mercy. You know, I'm reading this book. Teresa, you wanted to say something before I talk about the book that I'm reading. Teresa, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
Now we can.
Yeah, okay. So just kind of to continue, we're saying Tricia, the fact that his father, you know, he wasn't defensive. He was offensive. Like he went on the charge. You're not going to treat my child like this. You know, color is going to blind this situation. You know, you're wrong, and and I'm going to call you out on it. I think that is what every parent a black or a brown child needs to do. We need to educate our kids. We've talked about this before. As of our message. I told my kids, if anybody ever tells you go back to where you came from, you're like, hey, here before you. So you can. My ancestors were here before you. We have to teach them how to respond in a way that is not submissive. And I think that's and speaking of leadership summit, ladies, you need not Hannah Gabriel's talk. She said something with us today. Remember when she shared that quote about how submissiveness, if it was natural, been pre, it's not a thing that has to us because if it were natural, then nature would find its way to find that balance in this is we are preaching submissiveness to our kids. That's what we're doing. And so everything, look, white people know they know, and and I don't want to use that in offensive. I'm sorry, because it might sound offensive. I have a lot of friends who I care for deeply and who are beautiful human beings.
White supremacist mentality.
So I think that the more that as we empower our kids, we teach them what to teach them how to and not you were mentioning and I think Tricia, we do that because we're scared that our kids hurt. But the fact is that you said it doesn't matter how we those guidelines, they're still getting hurt. So do we just change that? It's time that we do change that. I think it's time that we power them. And if they're going to be hurt anyway, as some people say, I'd rather die standing than kneel the rest of my life, right, or something of the sort. We need to be more with our children, and I mean, it's never too late to start. So,
can I ask a question real quick before you share that?
Go ahead, Sean. Go ahead.
Just to the panel here, what are we doing? I'm just thinking of this as we're speaking to the development of the brain and the minds of young Black and brown children when we are causing them to ingest this level of stress at such a young age when they should be living just like any white child across this world. So what are we doing? And is this why a lot of times there are some struggles in classrooms, et cetera, because there's the additional stresses, pressures? I'm just saying, I got 10,000 thoughts in my head that's doing that when we're talking about you have to prepare them and teach them, don't do this, don't put your hands in your pockets, don't stare to, don't touch anything. What are we doing?
Everything is good.
So I want to submit a couple of things to you. First of all, we are a traumatized race. People of color, not only in America, everywhere in the world, we have been traumatized. And we have been working and functioning from our trauma for generations. And this is what we give our children, because trauma informed, we try to soften the blow, we think, by trying to tell them this is what you need to do. And people tell us that in society, because anytime there is an incident of a Black man that gets killed or gunned down by police brutality, what is the first thing you hear? Well, he should have listened. He should have, right? White supremacy mentality also influences the way people view us, because we're always viewed as the aggressors. We're always viewed as the people with, you talk too much. You should just be subdued. And something that you guys said today, I think Shonda said it, that's submissive, and Theresa. We have, not only as people of color, but as women, we have been taught, we have internalized submissiveness. And I want women to listen to this carefully, especially women who are in the Christian world, where we are taught that to be submissive means that you take abuse. He must treat you any way he wants. You must go out there, make the bread, come home and clean the house, do everything. And everyone must sit and look at you. Look at what submissiveness has done. And then we end up with the cancer. We end up with the breast cancer. We end up with the high blood pressure. Trauma, submissiveness. I'm reading a book that is called Black Fatigue. And maybe this is one of the pink rooms that we need to talk about, where this author talks about how we're all fatigued from trying to, as Teresa said, be submissive, be trying to fit the mold, trying to not put your hands in it, trying to do things right. And what it is creating on us is just doubling the trauma on us. Because as Tricia said, we try to live in defensive living, but it's never enough.
It's never enough.
It's never enough. And we need to learn that it really doesn't matter what we do or say. And that is why we have to make the choice where we can, especially as women of color. You have to make the choice to step into the room as you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because you start cutting yourself down and fitting yourself to fit that mold, thinking that this would give you some type of it's not going to. And it's not going to go for long. So anyway, great stuff. Rich, we could continue with it. But we have to go to what we came here for today. We wanted to talk to you a little bit about Dr. Susan Moore. Tricia is going to set it up, and I'm going to bring on the screen our invited guests while Tricia shares with us a little bit about Dr. Susan Moore. And we have two professionals that are going to also share their experience. So Tricia, set it up for us. What happened to Dr. Susan Moore? And we put the link of the video at the beginning of this, so you can also watch the video or Google it, and you're going to see the full story. But Tricia, set it up for us.
So Dr. Susan Moore is daughter of immigrants, like many of us, 52 years old with one son, taking care of her son and both her parents who have Alzheimer's disease. And in the mid of November came down with COVID as a practicing physician. And eventually had to be hospitalized. And she went to this particular hospital because she had worked there. She had been there before, it was close to her home. It became quickly apparent that she was not getting the care she needed to get. And she became very intentional about the way she spoke to her healthcare team to make them aware of what she was feeling and what she needed in order to feel better. And what happened was a series of interactions where she was diminished. She was not only not heard, but treated in such a way as to say, I hear you and I don't care. And I'm not going to do what you need because I don't want to. From colleagues, when she checked on the time, how long it had been since she'd received care, and she spoke to the nursing team about it, they came back at her. And the reason we know all of this is because she decided, because we know in the COVID world, family can't visit you. There's no one who you can say, are you seeing what's happening to me? There's no witnesses. So she went on social media and said, this is what's happening to me. And just like George Floyd, when he said, I'm going to die here, she said, this is how Black people die from COVID. And sure enough, she was let out of that hospital. One day later, her son had to call the ambulance again for her, and she died. So November 19th, she fell ill. December 20, she passed away from COVID. And what has brought national attention to her case is a link to what we just said. Everything we've said about why Black people get sick and die doesn't count in her case. We can't say it's social determinants of health, poor education, doctor and engineer. Bad family life, loving parents, loving family. Low socioeconomic status, again, doctor and engineer. Could not advocate for herself, advocated for herself. Does not know the language, doesn't know how to communicate with the healthcare team, not true either. Knows the language, communicated as much as she could with the healthcare team. And with all of that, she still died from COVID. And what that leaves in us is a sense of, if Dr. Moore could die, what is left for the rest of us? And that is why we decided that as a Pink Room, we will not only talk about this from this is news point of view, but actually speaking to Black female professionals in healthcare who have not only seen it, but experienced what racism does in healthcare to Black women, Black patients. So Norca, I'm sure you're going to introduce our guest.
Thank you very much, Tricia. And we dedicate again this to Dr. Moore and to many Dr. Moores that are out there. And we again, in her honor, say her name, Dr. Susan Moore. And we have with us today Dr. Lorna Gordon and Dr. Maricel Chivas. I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and tell you where they work and what they do, so that you might get an idea of the powerful women that are sitting here in this room with us today. So Dr. Maricel Chivas, could you begin? I think you're muted.
Hi, I'm Maricel. I'm an OBGYN practicing in California. I'm actually close to where Teresa is, which is in El Centro, California. We are unique in that we're a desert community close to the Mexican border. So the population that we serve, probably about 85%, I think that is all right, is Mexicans. And then the remainder, everyone else. Just to give you a little bit of background on me, I think it would be helpful. For some of the things that Tricia was saying, I was widowing. I went to medical school in 1995 in Illinois, and it was tough. We had 199 students. The majority were white males. There were a handful of us. There were actually 12 Black students in our class. And it was tough. There were a lot of Asians. And of course, day in and day out, you're met with racism, prejudices because of the color of your skin. So then flash on into residency, where I actually had a physician throw me out of his OR, telling me that, and I was actually a senior resident at that time, that went to go in to do a hysterectomy, assist with a hysterectomy because my junior resident wasn't able to do it. And he actually threw me out of the OR because I came in late after finishing my case. And his reason was, who do you think you are coming into my OR late? Do you think you're in a ghetto? Never forgot. There were anesthesiologist students, nursing students, and others, probably about, you know how it is in residency, about 8 to 9 people in the room. He was Indian, East Indian, okay? So one of the things that Tricia mentioned was, or I think Shonda said, the child mentioned, why are we looked upon by everybody?
That's my son.
So I said not only Asians, I remember in residency or medical school going through rotations, particularly internal medicine in Chicago. And I was in West Chicago, where it's mostly Black patients, where East Indians, because they go through the caste system, would be treating patients horribly. So we got it from all ends, from all sides. It was trying. It was a very trying time. When I went to apply, I had a recruiter, and I remember saying, well, I think I want to go to California. I'm tired of the cold. I came from New York. That's where I was born. I mean, it was just, I wanted something different. So she sent me to a whole bunch of places here in California. I was in Los Cerritos, I think it is. Tara says in that place called Los Cerritos. And it was a Filipino medical director of a clinic who called after my interview, which I thought went well, who called the recruiter and said, why on earth would you send me a Black woman? So this is what we face day in and day out. And then here I am. The interesting thing, and this is where I feel we have to push on, and with the help of God, you got to get through this, because it is tough. Through a lot of humiliation, where I've had to stand up for myself because no one else will. Coming from parents from Cuba who were not educated, who could not advocate for me. So you have to, and we as females, as Black females, we have to advocate for ourselves, because no one else will do it for you. I will, and I put all the honor and glory to God on this, because he has helped me push through. I have a private practice here. I will say, of all of the OBGYNs who have their own practice here, I'm the only one whose practice continues to grow, whose practice sees the most, if you think that this is success, and I don't necessarily look at it as that, they do, private insurance compared to other of the physicians. So I think that we just have to continue to push ahead.
Yes.
Now, I would say another thing in relation to this, and that is the sexism. Sexism that comes in medicine. Not only that we're faced, and Dr. Gordon will probably attest to that, but women, when I get called to the ER to see a woman with pelvic pain, the doctor in the ER has already diagnosed her with PID.
It happened to me.
Thank you. And
I'm a doctor.
Pelvic because you've had surgery, or because you have a urinary tract infection, because you have gonorrhea and chlamydia.
Yep.
And who gets gonorrhea and chlamydia most disproportionately? Black women, because they're out there. They're out there doing whatever they need to do. It's what you get all the time. I've had this since medical school, since residency, and I continue to get this. I've had patients who have relationships have been broken because they thought that their partner was cheating on them and gave them chlamydia and gonorrhea, and it was negative. So it's an education that we have to our women. You do not get from that. So it's a constant, I would say, struggle. So that's the background. And I guess part of what this discussion is also about is solutions, because we know what the background is. For me, it's educating, trying to make the young women that I see as patients or in churches, to make them as proud and feel as good as about themselves, because it's not just, it's white America, it's certain Latino countries. We have, and someone also mentioned Black people that are against us because you don't have the certain hair, the certain color. We have East Indians. We have tons of Middle Easterns here, as Teresa knows, doctors here, because the climate is so similar. So a lot of them are here, but they don't regard not only women, Black women, but even women. One doctor that he said every single patient of his, as much as possible, will get a C-section. He doesn't even try to put them into labor. Why? Because the vagina is for the husband. That's his feeling. Be preserved for the husband. What is that? Where do you get that from? So these are the kinds of challenges that we have, and the only thing we can do is empower women by educating them, letting them know, you know what, you are a queen, you are worth more, and giving them as much as we can, giving them back as much as we can because of what we've been through and continue to go through.
Right. Wow. Thank you for that, Dr. Gordon.
So, good evening, everyone. How are you all doing?
Hello.
Hi.
So, I'm Lana Gordon. I am the Chief of Adolescent Medicine at Nemours Children's Hospital in Orlando, Florida. And I'm also the Director of equity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion in for graduate medical education. And so a little bit kind of thinking about my backstory, I think that one of the things that is ironic and sad is that there's so many elements of my story that are similar to Dr. Chiba's story, but 17 years later. So I graduated from medical school in 2009. When I entered my class, there were 120 of us. Of the 125 of us were Black. By the time that I graduated, I was the only Black person of the original 120 who graduated in my class. There were 2 additional Black women who were from the year ahead of me who graduated with us. So there were 3 of us that walked across the stage. And I think that what is, I think, most frustrating in that experience as well. My dog is also jealous whenever I talk. He can be a part of the conversation as well. And I think that what is most frustrating to me about that experience is thinking through, I remember there was a Black gentleman in my class who was of Haitian descent, had gone to the same university for undergrad, and was well known by the admissions committee, was kind of accepted in a kind of undergrad to medical school honors program that was designed for, minorities. And his uncle died during our first year of medical school. And this uncle was someone who raised him. So he was born in Haiti. He moved here, as a child, and he lived with this uncle until his parents were able to come. And because it was his uncle, he was not given any bereavement. Brooklyn. He was not given any bereavement leave. In exchange, though, later on that year, there was another young lady in our class who said that her brother died. And I say said that her brother died because to this day, there is no proof that her brother actually died. No death certificate. And it was not a brother she knew. However, she was allowed to take exams later. She was given extra time to take what we call our shelf exams, which are the exams that you take at the end of kind of each step in your training. And she was not required to pass step 1 before entering her clinical rotations, which allowed her to still continue to graduate on time with us. She was not eligible to enter the match with us because she still had some mandatory rotations to complete. However, she petitioned to be able to walk because she said this was her class and she wanted to walk with us as opposed to walking with the class the next year. And she was allowed to do that. And I am proud of my class in that all of us recognized kind of the injustice of it. And when they called her name, we all turned our backs.
Wow.
Because we were just all like, she's not a part of our class.
Yes.
She does not own the distinction of doctor. And so, we didn't feel that it was respectful for her to be called that. But nonetheless, I mean, she's actually, successfully completed training. She actually practices in the area, which is kind of funny because adolescent medicine and OB overlap and interlock a lot. And so it was funny when some of the liaisons from the hospital went by her practice, because she opened her own private practice in town relatively recently. She was like, "Oh yes," she's like, "I know Dr. Gordon. We went to medical school together," or whatever. So they called me up and they were like, "Oh, she said that she wants to have lunch with you. You all went to medical school together." I said, "Look, if you really want me to have lunch with her, I will have lunch with her." But I said, I said she should question why we went to medical school together, but we're not in contact.
True.
There's a reason.
Liaison was like, I was wondering that because she was like, "You're very personable." So I've never heard you mention her or whatever. And so I was like, I wonder. But she's like, "I know people fall out of, touch with people." I said, "Yeah,
there's a reason."
But I said, there's a class Facebook group. She's not a part of the class Facebook group.
Wow.
I was like, we don't claim her, but but I mean, I think for me, when I think about adolescents and I think about young people, I agree that education is, the most important piece of it. I mean, while adolescent medicine sees both girls and boys, the vast majority of our practice is going to be young women. And I think that, it's the conversations that I have with young women around, one, them feeling empowered about their health, feeling that there's no question that they could ask a doctor that they should be ashamed of, that anything that they want to know the answer to or that they're curious about is a valid question, and that my time is, that their question is valuable enough for my time. And so, I don't rush my patients through their appointments. I listen to them specifically, sometimes to their parents' dismay. But, it is an adolescent-centered visit. And because I think that this is how young people learn to be good advocates for their health. And what I like is that I'm seeing the fruits of that in the hospital system. So children's hospitals, particularly freestanding children's hospitals, are very child-centric and very parent-centric because of that. Okay. And so it's funny, some of my patients now, when they go to other divisions, they say, well, I actually want to talk to the doctor because, when I'm in adolescent medicine, the doctor talks to me, the doctor asks me questions, and the doctor asks me what I think I should be doing. And you haven't asked me that. And my understanding is that that is my right as a teenager. So I feel like something is working. Excellent. Because definitely my colleagues bring it up at chief meetings where they are unhappy. But I think also thinking about just women in medicine, I think that one of the things is just the idea that women always continue, particularly Black women, but always pay that double tax. Mm-hmm. And so, I look at pediatrics, which is an overwhelmingly female predominant profession. So almost 60% of pediatricians are women. However, when you look at leadership positions, still only 5 to 6% are occupied by women.
Wow.
So when we look at the chiefs and, within the Department of Pediatrics at my hospital, there are 25 of us. Of the 25, only 5 of us are women. Wow. And then when you think about, then when you break it down by age, I am the only woman under 40. There's only 1 woman who's under 50, and the other 3 women are over 60.
Wow.
And so, and it's funny because I was saying this to my mom actually just this weekend, and I said, it's because of how things are set up. Mm-hmm. One of the things I recognize, especially with everything going on with this pandemic and, kind of a lot of women doing the double duty of working and then, rearing children, but also homeschooling children or kind of balancing all of these different roles and then taking care of the extended community. Do you have food? Do you have the things you need, has somebody got your groceries so that you don't have to go out? Women do that work. And so when, we have meetings, especially in the beginning of the pandemic, when we're thinking about how are we deploying resources, what are the backup plan upon the backup plan upon the backup plan? Well, all of these meetings are happening 5:30, to whenever. Mm-hmm. Well, and then people want you to have your cameras on, because it's not respectful if you don't have your cameras on. And I frequently say, well, but what about people who that's dinner time? Mm-hmm. At one point I remember I made the suggestion, I said, why do we have the meetings at 5:30? Why not have the meeting at 7:30 or 8 o'clock where people could get home, they could get their life situated and then come back and meet? Mm-hmm. And other people, the men, said that time wouldn't work because their wives would be upset because they would hold dinner. Because of course, what they do is they stay at work late. And then go home after it's all done. Oh, and wow. That may be true, but I said all of the women don't stay late. We go home because because the household doesn't run if we don't go home. So it's a luxury to be able to stay late. It's not because it means that someone else is at home taking care of all the things that needed to happen at home. So you could stay late.
It also hurts your chances to leadership.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
when you're not committed enough.
Right. Exactly.
You're going home early.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And that's I mean, exactly. When I said this to my mom too. I said, when a man takes off time around the holidays because, he wants to spend, my kids are just off for this 1 week. I want to be home with them. Oh, such a committed family man. That's so nice. When a woman says the same thing, she isn't committed to the job. She doesn't understand the job comes first. Right. And so we gaslight women, which then limits those opportunities for leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that both of you have brought up these points. I find it interesting, however, I want to go back a little bit to the point of Dr. Moore, that she advocated for herself, because both of you touched on the importance of education and advocacy, and I do believe that is critical. But this woman did. She advocated for herself. She was clearly educated on the issue that she was experiencing, but that was not enough. What are your thoughts about that? What else do we need to do? What else can be done? In a case like that, I just feel like there was nothing else that could be done. But what are your thoughts about
I mean, I feel like there was very little else that could be done or anything else that could be done. And to say that something other could be done would be to gaslight her experience, because the reality is that you shouldn't have to advocate to the level that she did to get good care.
She even called a patient advocate. Eventually, she even had to call a patient advocate.
Yeah.
And that is how she was able to talk to the medical director or some administrator who said, we're here to hear you, blah, blah, blah. And then she was sent home. So she did everything. And that's what causes us to feel like especially sensitive about this issue, because it's a colleague. And then that means no one is safe, because if as physicians, especially Black female physicians, what you are telling your patients is know your symptoms, know your medication, speak up, know the name of your doctor, ask questions. That's what you educate your patients to do. And then she herself did all of that, and she still wasn't heard. And she said, I'm gonna die. So the last gift I can give you is my testimony. It's not enough. You need to deal with the root issue. And the root issue here isn't lack of knowledge. The root issue here, common in all our stories, everything we've talked about today, is racism. How do we deal with that root issue? I still don't know what to say there.
I think, and this is something that I obviously have had a lot of time to think about. She did everything that she was supposed to do. As you said, Tricia, there was nothing left for her to do. And so that's what makes it so frustrating for us. And, you know, now you can sort of now rush and make a committee, as that I love people doing. We're going to make a committee to look at diversity and blah, blah, blah. But what's in people's heart and mind, you cannot change. And that's the problem. That's what we face with. And I was actually sort of talking to someone today about when you go into the operating room and you see a person open, they're all draped, they're asleep. You don't see anything. You see their intestine, you can see the gallbladder, you can see their liver, you can look for the stomach. It looks the same. Somebody to tell me, what color are they? What race are they? They're not. And so it's the most frustrating thing to think that we are being judged. And if we can somehow, and I guess it's Dr. Gordon who is looking at these adolescents and these children and her influence on them to start bringing them up to see different, because it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
These older people, they are set in their ways. I don't see how we can change them. I really don't. I know it sounds frustrating, almost sounds defeatist, but how do you make people realize my heart beats just the same way your heart, and it looks the same way your heart. My brain works just as well as your brain. How do we make people see that? I don't know.
They've seen change, and that's the thing that's more frustrating. So they have seen, when they have looked at the LGBTQ community and the medical community's acceptance and treatment of LGBTQ patients, and measure that against the medical community's acceptance of Black patients. Black patients haven't moved. The measure is still the same. LGBTQ community has gained acceptance, has advanced. They have covered more ground. And we see why.
Why is that?
See why. There is policy.
Right. I mean, I think that it exactly.
Policy. We need to stop trying to change hearts, because they're not going to change by themselves. They need to be helped by law to say, if you do this, you will be held responsible legally.
And on top of that, the LGBT community has one advantage.
Yes, it does. It
absolutely does. A lot of them are white.
It absolutely.
Well, I was going to say, I don't even think the advantage is that a lot of them are white, because when you actually look at the data, There's even numbers of white and Black people in the LGBTQ community.
Of course.
But the issue is that it's a concealable identity. So you can't conceal the color of your skin until it's safe to disclose it. You can't conceal your gender until it's safe to disclose it, but you can conceal your sexual orientation. And so I agree that, you know, part of it is creating policy, which is some of what I've been working on with the hospital. You know, after George Floyd's murder, the hospital developed a stance that they were going to try to work to become an anti-racist organization. But of course, now the hard work of saying, well, what does that mean? And how are we recording these events and what happens when these things happen? And, you know, holding people's feet to the fire. So for instance, one of my patients was 2 days before her 14th birthday, presented to the ER. She has a sickle cell trait, and she also has heavy bleeding with her periods. And, you know, her periods do not respond to conventional medication for all the OBs. I mean, I have her maxed out on 80 micrograms of estrogen a day, and she still bleeds pretty consistently. So I sent her to hematology, and hematology wants to do some additional testing. They think she has an inhibitor. Now, mom is difficult, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Definitely not a well-presenting patient in that sense, or a well-presenting mom in that sense. Her hematologist is actually Black as well, and she cannot stand her hematologist. So neither of them can stand it. Then they split a little bit. So, you know, all of this complicates when you present to the healthcare system. So she's not a likely patient. But she presented, and she, in the ER physician felt the need, compelled, because she had disclosed that she had a boyfriend who was 15, felt the need to call DCF and the police. DCF did not take the case, and she still called the police. And so when mom gets home, she's greeted with police at the door. Now, ultimately, they didn't do anything, but you know, at the end of the day, first of all, it was my direct patient. The ER did not call me. Additionally, they did not call me as the adolescent medicine specialist. On top of that, mom asked multiple times for me to be called, and they did not call still. So of course, it ended up in my desk the next morning, because as the chief of adolescent medicine, social work, they were very confused because they did call the social worker, and social work said, I don't think we need to call. And the physician proceeded to call anyway, but then they were unsure if maybe they were incorrect. So that is actually how the situation was first brought to my attention. And so when I then took the ER physician to task about it, she started to tell me about Romeo and Juliet and age of consent. And I said, that all applies to sex when you're with an adult. I said, sex between two minors, none of that law falls into that category. Well, she was 13 and she was so young, I felt like she might be being abused. And I said, first of all, I said, she's 13, but she doesn't look 13, first of all. So I said, you didn't look at her and think, oh my gosh, this small child. Number two, I said, her birthday was Sunday. Like, this was Friday, you know, by the time it was Thursday night, but it's Friday by the time we're having this conversation. I said, her birthday's Sunday. So, I mean, she's 2 days away from 14, which ultimately means she has a partner who is within a year of her age. So I said, I just need to understand why you felt compelled to call the police against advice from other professionals who do this more regularly. And she was like, well, I did a child abuse, certificate, and I feel very strongly about these kinds of things. I said, but why did you think she was abused? Her mom knew she was sexually active. Like, it was not a secret. She told you it was consensual. I said, do you feel the need to call, DCF on every set of teenagers you have who are, having sex? So then it was funny. So legal gets involved, and they say they've come to the conclusion that it was valid to call. I said, so let me get this straight. You're saying that you think the hospital policy should be that we call DCF every time teenagers report that they're having sex, because you're saying the age of consent in Florida is 18. So that means everybody under 18 having sex, you're supposed to call DCF. I said, great. You want to start doing that? I will start doing that. And I'll see how much legal you have now going on in your hand. Because what's interesting is the hospital is a referring hospital, but its immediate location is in a very affluent neighborhood.
Guess who's going to show up in the ER?
I said, because you know what? I said, I'm going to start calling DCF. And I said, I'm going to be calling DCF on a bunch of doctors in this office's in this hospital's children.
Yep.
Because I said, I don't think you have any idea. I said, considering that the average age of sexual debut in the United States is 15. I don't think you have any idea how many people are having sex under 18. But if that's what you'd like to, well, no, I'm not saying that. I said, no, I said, I know that's not what you're saying. I said, because the bottom line of it is that the reason why DCF was called on this patient is because she was a Black girl.
That's right.
And after I said that, crickets. So there's a meeting scheduled for sometime in January, so we can outline some kind of policy. But this is the issue, because there's not the accountability. Everybody wants to have the nice conversation.
Right.
And I said, yeah, we'll have the nice conversation. I said, here's the link, here's some education, here's other case law. The lawyer wasn't prepared. I said, you do realize that adolescent medicine specialists deal a lot with law because we practice in a very gray area of law. So I said, you don't want just national law. Here's University of Miami's law school's position on all of these minor confidentiality issues. So let me show you how your belief system, apparently your interpretation of law, is very skewed from other lawyers. But I said, I don't think it's your interpretation of the law. I think it's nothing other than the color of her skin.
That's right. That's right. It's interesting. It's interesting, Dr. Gordon, that you're sharing this, and to Dr. Chiba's point. Clearly, we not only in healthcare. I see Dr. Charlemagne mentioned that we are providing care through racist lens. I would say that we provide service in this country, work in this country in general, to racist lens. I could tell you stories about academia, but we're not bringing it to the point. But what I think here is critical when I hear you in this story is that you were able to speak truth to power very wisely, but in a way you're advocating for the patient without necessarily becoming an activist, right? I wonder if the creation of policies, and also knowing that those of us who are in positions where we can say so need to also speak up, like in your case, and speak truth to power. As you said it because it was a Black girl, and then you heard cricket. I wonder if
she is the power.
Exactly.
She is the power because she is chief. Notice that.
Exactly.
The reason this came to her attention is not because she's her patient. It's because she's the chief of adolescent medicine and she's also DIO.
But that's why I said, I wonder if more of us in positions of power, instead of being silent many times, that we take the opportunity, as Dr. Gordon did, to speak up, to make things, and to create policy, because I do believe policy is critical here in these cases.
Yeah,
but I think the challenge, of course, is... Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Dr.
No, go ahead.
Dr. Gordon. I could so see myself as a social worker in that field. And at that point, if she was disrespected as a professional or he as a social worker, period, because you're asking us to be involved. We should be involved because we can see things from different angles, not only medically and legally, but that whole aspect was disrespected and disregarded as a professional who said there was no need, right? Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, in Norca, in relation to both of your points, where you're talking about policies, but I think it was Dr. Gordon, you're mentioning like the statistics as to where we are in terms of administrative physicians, and those are the ones who are actually getting those policies implemented. And so how do we push, as Dr. Chibas would say, push through, we can push through to get to those positions, right?
You pay a tax, Shonda. To get to the position, you cannot be an activist. If you are too loud, too active, too defensive, you will not be called to the table.
Which brings to the point that this is the problem. This is why these policies are not there.
But let me just, we need to be a lot more strategic about how we do this.
I agree.
And that is the conclusion that healthcare is coming to, Black healthcare is coming to. We need to be a lot more strategic and teach each other how to do this. You be quiet, you get on the table, then you speak.
Right.
You know when you're at the table who you speak to. You know who the allies are. You know who you don't waste time with. You don't start yelling first year medical school.
Right.
You wait until you're done, because if not, you won't be one of the three who finish. Wow. And then you're facing this constant, you're a sellout. And for all the rest of your friends and neighborhood, you're a sellout because you're not speaking up. Not understanding that for you to get into the room, you have to be quiet because the end game, and that is what we need to be so much better at. We need to be not only doing the medicine, we need to be doing the academia. We need to be in front in the classroom so that as we're teaching the medical students, they see us in front and not just wait until they're in the hospital when their entire framework is made up. So we need to organize and strategize where we are in all the. I went to school in the 80s. We're seeing 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and we're seeing the same story.
The same story.
I mean, I definitely, so for me, being on the admissions committee is important at every medical school that I go to. So I've been on the admissions committee since I was a medical student all the way through, because I recognize that that's part of the power. But I agree, you have to, I mean, my mother used to always say to me that you have to know when you hold the handle, you have to know when you hold the blade. And that also you have to kiss a horse's ass before you can kick it. And like, I think that those are important adages that I remember her saying to me, and I do, I think about that. So for instance, I spoke up about that scenario. There are other scenarios that I've left for other people to speak up about, or when people come and talk to me about it, I say, well, you should mention this at this point, because you can't always be the angry Black woman at the table.
Right.
There's plenty to be angry about, because perception is people's reality. But I do think that, with like after George Floyd, I remember a lot of people saying, oh, well, you need to be doing this or you need to do that. And I, as I said to my little sister is a pharmacist in the pharmaceutical industry, and she is much more fiery than me. And there are a number of things she was very annoyed about. And I said to her, let's remember, all of us couldn't be Martin and Malcolm, because if every single person in the 60s was Martin and Malcolm, there would be none of us here today. Somebody had to keep their medical license. Somebody had to keep their law degree. Somebody had to make sure they didn't get kicked out of their job. Because I said, if that didn't happen, I said, Martin and Malcolm were important, but everybody can't be Martin and Malcolm. There's a role for all of us to play. So there are going to be some people who are going to provide funds. There's going to be some people who are going to provide education. There's going to be some people who are going to organize. There are going to be some people who are going to be on the front lines. And I think that one of the things we as a community have to do is we have to quit, being quick to create cancel culture and say, I'm done with this person. They didn't post about this. They're canceled, or whatever. Because I remember that going on a lot with a lot of the happenings of this year. Right. And not everybody is in a position where they can post. I have to be careful about what I post. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think anybody who follows me knows I post, but
you post a lot.
But I don't post certain things. I mean,
right. But you
my sister's Facebook page.
But Dr. Gordon, you post. Yeah, you might have a strategy to post it, but I would say that a lot of it that you've posted, I don't want to use the term activist, but you've certainly spoken truth to power in a lot of your posts.
Well, but I'm very careful, because when I read my posts, I go back through and I realize that if anybody screenshotted it and said, why did the chief of adolescent medicine say that? I would say, what did I say that was incorrect? Right. I brought up statistics.
Right. You always
publishable facts. Mm-hmm. I didn't say that, burn the healthcare system down, everybody's racist.
Let me ask this question. So we talked about the LGBTQ community, and one thing about them is that they're very organized, right? And they network, and they're very supportive of each other. I find that oftentimes it could be because of lack of having the numbers. We don't network as keenly, and we definitely are not as well organized. But I want to go back to Dr. Moore, because I'm thinking about her posting that. Who could have come to her help? Like, I felt like she was alone. She posted this. Everyone talked about it. A couple days she was dead. Wasn't there anyone that could come to her rescue, could have said, hey?
There were people in her hospital. There were Black women in her hospital that
and
found out after the fact.
Right. I was going to say, I think the problem was the timing.
The timing.
Because for sure, I mean, even nationally, NMA, like there were lots of people who could have come to her rescue who had lots of influence. But I knew I didn't hear about her until after she passed.
Right.
Because I think a lot of times that hashtag is unfortunately too, we like our hashtags as a community. But we aren't really into it until it's a problem. It's too late.
Yeah. So there's a need for us to strategize, to definitely network. Glenda asked a question here, and this is from someone who's a lay person. She said, how can we get the policies in place? Because there's no change throughout. And I understand Glenda, because as a patient, you feel that every time you go, you're going to get double abused. You have to think about what you have to answer or what you have to ask, because you're not really sure that you're getting the treatment that you should be getting. So how do we get the policies? Dr. Chiba.
One of the things that I've done, and I am the chief of OBGYN in my hospital, and this took some doing. I called a meeting. And I think it's like you said, Dr. Gordon, you have to be strategic, or whoever else mentioned that, strategic about getting in and getting into these positions so that you can make change.
Right.
I called a meeting with our ER directors, our med-surg directors, our OR directors. And then we put some policies in place to start with. When a patient of mine comes in, you better call me. You call the doctor. Why didn't her physician get called? I'm sure we have physicians.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't her physician get called? That's what I would want to know. Why didn't you call me to let me know that my patient, maybe I couldn't come in to see her, but who knows, I will. I will put on my PAPR and come in to see her, because your doctor is there, they will advocate for you.
Yeah.
If she's a doctor too, she's going to get the best room in the house. That's how it works. So we have to get in. Dr. Gordon, we have to get in, the ones who have position to get in, so we can work with administration and the other managers, because if your heart is not right, then you're going to have to follow the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise you get fired. So that's, I think, one way to start. We got to get ourselves in, and however strategically we can do it, then we got to get in.
Let me say this. I became dean of a school of public health 10 years ago. 2010. I was asked by the president to change the school, and I did that. I looked at the future of public health, eliminated departments, and did 3 basic tenets: faith-based, global lens, health equity, 10 years ago. Someone on this call, I appointed health equity officer for the school, which meant that everything we did had to have those 3 things in place.
Mm.
The result of that was I lost my job. I was afforded an opportunity by somebody else, a Black man, who said, come work with me, HBCU. So we were one of the first schools to do the transformation. You won't see us mentioned anywhere, because why would a Black woman have that on? 10 years later, I'm working at another college of public health. I have a white female dean. When George Floyd happened, I wrote her and I said, we need a comprehensive strategy. We don't need any more statements. We're gonna do the academic master plan. I'm in charge of that. Let me weave a comprehensive strategy to address racism in the academic master plan. I'm getting all the support. I'm getting all the backing. You know why? Because now I am under the cover of a white woman.
Right.
And the rest of my team is white, men and women. And because I've worked with them quietly, with all my credibility outside of diversity. All my credibility comes from accreditation. And since that is meat and bones, and they can't see as fuzzy, fluffy stuff, then under that cover, now I can deal with what my passion is about. I've been talking about this for all my life, but it isn't until now, all of these years later, going through all of this, when you ask, how do we get the policies to change? Not tomorrow. It's going to take decades, and it's going to take all of us finding a way to get it in. But if that's why what Dr. Shiva said first, we need to push through. That's why Dr. Gordon is nodding her head. She knows exactly what I'm talking about. And we all agree. We cannot be so impatient to see action that we shoot ourselves in the foot and lock ourselves out of the rooms. It's going to take time.
I just wish in these circumstances and the one of Dr. Moore that just as we had to adjust for this pandemic and work virtually and shift and do all that, that we could just make policies come into place because we're suffering.
Yeah.
The people making the policies don't look like us, Shonda.
I hear Dr. Tricia. I hear her. My concern, and I hear Shonda, my great concern is that we have been in this for what now, centuries? That's my concern. My second concern is that with the death of George Floyd, there has been shifts. We cannot say that there have not been battles that have been won. There are conversations that we're having now that 2 years ago we would not dare to have, right? Mm-hmm. What I do find, and I'm coming from an academic perspective, is that there's a lot of performance. There's a lot of performative equity. There's a lot of talk about it, but there's really no teeth to it. And that is my concern, that the longer we wait, that the longer things need to come into place, we're going to be replaying these scenes for decades to come. And then you're talking about our children and our grandchildren experiencing this trauma of being re-traumatized time and time again. And possibly even one of us on this call or listening on the call, even dying because there's no protection in place. That is really my concern. I agree with you, Shonda. I feel like the need is now, but my concern is that we seem not to have the teeth to make it work now. And then I wonder, are we pulling our strengths together? Are we networking to make this happen? There's so many questions that I have in mind. Why can the LGBTQ come up and have this? And I agree with Dr. Lorna. You don't come up. You have to say that you are. You don't have to necessarily walk into a room and people know. But what is it that we perhaps need to also put in to get these things moving? And it doesn't take another century for it.
Accreditation. And that's the problem. The accreditation is a job that is tedious and that it takes someone who's really interested in doing it. It's not flashy. But what's going to make the difference, what we're doing in public health is putting into the accreditation standards. So we're looking at accreditation standards to say, if you're going to be accredited as a school of public health, this is what your curriculum needs to look like in regards to anti-racism. This is what your promotion and tenure guidelines need to look at. This is what we're going to have to go that deeply in. But for us to go that deeply in, it needed us to get on the board. Even getting on the board takes time. For this to happen at the hospital level is going to have to happen at the standards accreditation level.
Right.
Where the ones who write the standards say our patient satisfaction measures cannot show these types of complaints without us having a follow-up, closing the loop, evaluation. If not, you will not get accredited.
Right.
We are hit and missing. Right. That's why I say we need to be strategic. And from the experience, what I've lived is if we don't hit it, that's the teeth. Teeth is money and accreditation.
So I have a question though about that. How do you make that accreditation happen? Because one of the things, just as an example, when I was applying to medical school, we had, I don't know if they still have that, Lana, they have a book that we look through. Of course, it was a time of books, right? And not online. Where all of the medical school, they have, and the statistics broken down by race and ethnicity and so on and so forth. The University of Vermont was threatened with taking away funding from the federal government if they did not include people of color in their admissions for the class of 1995. You know what their reason was in the past why they never had one person of color? They said they couldn't find any. They said they couldn't find any. So the thing is making the excuses.
Right.
This is what bothers me. Making the excuses, because it's very easy to make the excuse, and then you get messy.
So I think that what I like about the accreditation idea is thinking about, so JCAHO in the hospital system. I mean, if you think about pain, the whole reason we have this opiate epidemic is because JCAHO said
pain became the next
people about their pain and how well their pain is managed. It's a vital sign, and we're now going to grade hospitals on it. So anti-racism has not made it into JCAHO's core requirements.
Right.
So I think that is something that we could advocate.
Right.
You know, in that sense. So I think that is, you know, something to think through. I think that, you know, what does give me hope and what I enjoy about the equity work I do within GME, more so than the equity work I do within the hospital, is that I do think that the younger physicians of all races are a little bit more aware, more cognizant. So I know that some of my leverage within the hospital is that I'm like, well, applicants for residency are asking, what is our policy?
Right.
What is happening? They care about that.
Very smart.
With the, you know, same thing with the medical school. When there are problems that, you know, residents notice, and they think it may be related to race or, you know, poverty or anything else, I say to them, you know, I think it might be too. So who do you ask about that? Because you see, people like when trainees ask questions.
Right.
Because they're curious. And so, you know, I always say to them, you know, you don't, you know, so when you notice something that's racist, that's discriminatory, that's whatever, you don't go out there and bark, you know, because that's going to be an issue. You come back and you get an attending who you recognize as an ally to come and bark. But what you can always do is ask a curious question. So I'm a little confused, you know, when I was on blah, 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 you know, they always did this, that, and that. So I notice your approach is different. Can you explain to me why your approach is different? You didn't tell them they did anything wrong. You're just curious.
I love that strategy.
You'd like to learn, you know, this other approach. And I particularly encourage the white residents to do that.
Right.
Because they have the ability to do that. And so when we talk about, you know, the DEI curriculum that we have the residents going through, which I actually really like, we have psychologists lead it actually, because I think psychologists have, you know, they have additional skills that we don't have as physicians in terms of getting people to think about things. And also they're very tolerant of silence. Like, they say the average doctor interrupts in 26 seconds. I mean, a psychologist will wait. So when they don't want to talk, that's okay. He'll sit there and watch, you know, because I mean, right now these sessions are on Zoom, but he will sit there and watch the clock count down 2 minutes, 3 minutes, you know, with no comment or question, you know, answer around the scenario. And then he'll start picking people out and saying, you know, well, can we comment on this? And so I think that these are things that I think will hopefully over time make things better.
Right. I like that strategy. You know why? Because you're leveraging this generation. And this generation is the BLM generation, white, black, whatever. They're asking the questions. And maybe they're the ones who drive some of this change. They practically will drive some of this change. So I really like that strategy because I think it can be used not only in health, it can be used also in academia. They're asking, they want to know what is our policy and how do we sustain the practice that we're currently having. I want to read a comment here from Sharma. She says that she liked what Dr. Tricia said. We must all find our place and the way in which we can bring about change. Oftentimes it will require self-sacrifice. Some of us have stopped sacrificing. So while we succeed, others continue to die. And that to me is a very powerful commentary. because yes, it requires self-sacrifice. And I think that often as people of color and as women, we need to view our entrances, whatever strategy we may use in these different worlds, layers, levels, as it's not just about me. It really is about the collective that I'm representing, because at the end of the day, in some kind of way, I will have some impact, hopefully positive impact, on how the collective is treated. So Glenda, she asked a question before, and now she's saying she thanks, so she understands what is said. Her concern is how much of us need to die. Does our whole race have to be wiped out before change occurs? Passionate question, Glenda. I think it is valid. So what? I understand, Glenda. I get it. It's like people are dying. Why do we have to wait another century?
We can't wait another century. And I believe that certain things are happening around, just like the murder of Mr. Floyd sparked certain things that went warp speed. So things we had never seen before. In my lifetime, I'd never seen white people marching with black people saying Black Lives Matter. I hadn't seen it. Right. And I didn't see it until Mr. Floyd. This Dr. Moore's death has caused the same sort of reaction. Agreed. So you are getting not only black patients saying nobody listens to me, now you're getting black doctors being a little bit more courageous about speaking out, because we have had to pay the tax just to be in the profession we are in, right? So you saw, I don't know if you saw a black physician from Seattle Children's Hospital, I believe, who after 20 years said, I'm done. I can't do this anymore. Right. And some people say, why did it take 20 years? Because for some people, it takes 20 years. And other people said, well, should he have stayed in and fought from the inside? Sometimes you fight for 20 years, you can no longer fight. And his resignation last week meant so much more than if he had resigned 2 years ago.
That's right.
Last week it made the news.
That's right.
So I'm hopeful that there's enough noise happening, but what we need to do is be level-headed. I know that it sounds like I'm trying to placate. I'm not. I'm just saying that you ask why the LGBTQ community has advanced and we haven't. Level head. Think about when HIV/AIDS just happened. When HIV/AIDS started in the mid-'80s in this country, it did not start in the Black community. And I remember I was doing a rotation in a hospital in Houston, and I saw the patient come in, and his chart came into a locked leather case with, you know, those movies with the spies that have handcuffs on the briefcases? Like that. Nobody could see what he had. The doctor wasn't allowed to talk to another doctor about this patient being HIV positive because of the connotation. And that so quickly moved away from stigmatizing white males and jumped into Haitians.
Yeah. Right.
And if you read about the history and why it took so long for it to be looked at as a public health problem, and it was allowed to grow, it was because it started in the Rock Hudson group of people.
Right.
Until we decide that we're going to be cold-headed, as passionate as we are, we're going to be cold-headed and network, do what we're doing here. I want to network with Dr. Gordon. I want to network with Dr. Sacibas. We have to.
Right.
I live in Tampa. She lives in Orlando. How come I don't know who she is? I've never heard of her.
Right.
But we need to do it, because if we don't, it will be another century. There'll be nobody left, but it doesn't have to be. We can do what we're doing here.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think the key is really networking. And Sharma, there's a comment here from Damaris, which I think is good for us who are the lay people, who are the patients. She says, question the questioner, even if they become frustrated. Yeah, we still need to continue to ask those questions. After all, it's our body. Sharma says something here that I strongly believe in. I believe we need to network, but I also believe that more than allies, we need to look for accomplices. An
Yes.
ally is someone who says to you, yeah, I'm with you. An accomplice is someone who's going to walk into that room and is going to say that, right? So she says, I believe that one way we can bring about swifter change is to empower those with privilege. Those who are disadvantaged and vulnerable because of their race further jeopardize themselves when they're in positions where they always need to speak up. I've found that those with the privilege are heard more. The very characteristics that place targets on our backs also stop us from being truly heard. And I think that is an important strategy that we need to start incorporating. We need allies, but we need accomplices. We need those first year students, those interns who are going to ask those questions.
Because one of the things that we've noticed also as a result of everything that's happened, the American College of OBGYN is now having that same conversation.
Excellent.
So therefore,
About
we
time.
need to get in positions so that we can continue to fuel that and see how we can make the change, because they're realizing that Black women are disproportionately dying from preeclampsia. We had the recent pediatrician,
Yes.
Dr. Gordon, her first child,
Yes.
and she died right after she delivered her first child, left a child and her husband without a mother from preeclampsia. And we know how to treat preeclampsia, but sometimes it's overlooked in certain people because, oh, well, she's Black, they have hypertension.
They have high blood pressure.
I was
She's a little obese. That's sort of normal.
That's
preeclampsia is dangerous.
I think the other thing, though, is that also as Black people, or as people of color in general, we also have to talk to each other. So the number of times that I see a patient, and the first time that things have come up around, things that may be shameful, but also things that honestly there should be no shame about, that are in the history, is because questions get asked.
Right.
And there shouldn't be a situation where you're finding out about your family's extended family history because you're in a doctor's office.
Wow.
You should know that beforehand. But unfortunately, we don't share that information with each other. So, when we think about, part of how the HIV epidemic became essentially a Black women's disease is because, and moved from a gay white man disease, is because when those gay white men went home and had HIV, while their parents didn't shout it from the rooftops, their parents didn't kick them out either.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times we not only don't shout the things that are wrong or that are bad or that are maybe shameful from the rooftop, but we kick our children out, or we kick our extended family out, or and I think that some of that is also where some of this is a challenge for us as Black people, because we have to recognize that the good, the bad, the ugly, they are still a part of us, and there's still strength in community.
Right.
Because when you go to the hospital and you are alone, you have no advocate. COVID has brought that out very vividly for everybody. But there are so many Black people who go to the hospital alone because they're pregnant and, their mom is mad that they're pregnant and they don't have, and their partner, is no longer in the picture.
Right.
And killing Black bodies.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
adding to the killing of Black bodies.
Right.
We have to find ways to work around all of this.
Right. The stigma of shame and silencing the realities of what we have. And then I think coupled with that is the fact that disease, the Black body is seen as a diseased body. Right. So if you're Black, automatically you come through the door and okay, you are this, that, and maybe that's far from the case. The conditions that we've been living in and so forth create these diseases, but we're not diseased people.
Right.
But we
have even internalized this as people.
But there's something that needs to be brought out with that. If they were seen as diseased bodies to be taken care of.
Right.
The problem is that they're seen as diseased bodies and, that's just the way things are.
Yes.
So they're not looked at as, because you have a higher risk, let me do this to address it upstream, to make sure you don't have, to make sure this doesn't happen to you. That's not how we're taught. We're taught that's how they present. Oh, well. And you come to expect a higher mortality because, oh well. And so it's not fixable.
Right. Right.
Just like you're not supposed to feel pain.
Right.
And that was one of the things with Dr. Moore. She said, I'm in pain. He said, I don't feel I should give you any more. She's been getting the narcotics. We understand what that means in suffering when you're trying to breathe and you're in pain. And he just said, I don't want to give you more drugs. You must be an addict. I'm not going to give you any more.
Yeah. Yeah. We have about 5 or 10 more minutes. We have quite a few people watching, and the discussion is definitely getting very good. Denise Miller, I'm sorry, Denise, I don't know why on YouTube it wasn't live, but yeah, she says here that we're seeing in medicine what corporate saw 30 or 40 years ago. And then she goes on to say, yes, disease is environmental, is not necessarily intrinsic. And Arlene says we're seen as disease bodies to be disposed of, just another teaching tool. And I want to add to that, we're not only seen as disease bodies to be, okay, well, that's it. We're also seen as bodies that are violent and bodies that are going to, the negative stigma on our bodies. This is something that we consistently need to be dealing with, addressing sometimes, but we need to be aware of and not internalize this as if we are people who are violent and aggressive. That's not what it is. I don't know if there are more questions here, or there's any comments that any one of you in the pink room here would like to make before we close out.
I would just like to say that I think that we as Black people, Black women in particular, we are one of the most diverse groups of people in the world. When you think about it, not only in terms of color and everything else that comes with it, culture. Norca's background, I think, is Costa Rica.
Panama.
It's different. Panama, I'm sorry.
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, Cuba, Mexico, Haiti, Africa, the islands, the Indian Islands. If we could just come together, and that's what I would love to see, more coming together. I think that unfortunately, perhaps the isolation in this country or whatever it is has made us even enemies of each other.
Yeah.
So that we are separate. And if I am a little lighter than you, if I'm a little darker than you, if my hair is different from yours, if my culture is different, if I have an accent, okay, if I speak another language. I worked at a clinic in Boston for a little bit when I was doing a master's degree. And I remember translating in Spanish for a physician. I was just an educator at that time. Not just, I was an educator. And I remember a Black girl came up to me and said, I thought you were one of ours. I thought you were one of us. You're speaking Spanish?
Wow.
We shouldn't have that kind of thing going on.
Right.
We should embrace each other, and we have to love each other as women. And that's what I think is going to start making a difference also. We have to take responsibility for ourselves, love each other, and say, how can I work with Norca to get this happening? How can I work with Dr. Gordon to make sure that these Black girls are getting the care that they need, that they're growing up to be women who are proud of their bodies, because that's another issue that comes, and everyone that the anorexia nervosa is not a thing that necessarily hits us. However, it's part of the adolescent group, and a lot of people think that's part of it. No, it isn't. So those are the kinds of things that I would like to also see, and that I feel like I can work on.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Dr. Gordon, do you have any? Yeah, go ahead, Sean.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sean.
I was just thinking about the double tax that Dr. Tricia was talking about, and just thinking about how when we're viewed, when we walk into receive some medical attention, we're seen as violent, aggressive, and highly tolerant of bearing pain, but yet we're also seen as these sick, diseased people. So what? I mean, I don't get it. Yet you like in, Dr. Moore's case, you see her as this diseased little person, but then you also see her as someone who's so highly tolerable of pain that she doesn't need to have that disease cared for. That seems like that just goes against all of what the medical field promotes, that you don't cause more harm.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, true.
I don't think it's necessarily intentional, Shonda.
Mm-hmm.
I think it doesn't come into their consciousness. When a patient walks in, you start hitting boxes and you start looking at what we call differential diagnoses just as they walk in, because you start forming your own male or female. Okay, what? Such an age of, age range, what could it be? And and unfortunately, the way that we learn, we start at the disease. That's how we do medicine. We don't start at the root causes. So when somebody walks in, I was a 42-year-old Black woman with abdominal pain, dean at the hospital I went to, and they saw sexually transmitted disease. And it took my brother 3 hours to convince them that I had one sexual partner who was my husband and that this was not a pelvic infection. And it took my brother, a physician, 3 hours in the institution I worked in for them to just change the hard disk to see anything beyond Black woman, 40 years old, must be sexually transmitted disease. Because medicine starts there, that's why I say I don't necessarily think it's intentional. Because you start with the numbers and that is how it's been counted. Part of it is going to have to be incorporating more public health in medicine, and a public health that is true, that looks at things as the root causes and not just as conditions that cannot be changed. In the meantime, patients themselves have to be as frustrating to doctors as Damati said she is. Because if you ask the question, they have to answer it. They can't say, I won't answer your question. Why am I getting this medication? Why am I not getting that? I want to bring my sister. I want to call my mother. Do it. It's the only way. Shyness, submission, and humility isn't going to get you the care you need. If it didn't get it to Dr. Moore, and that's my lesson. If Dr. Moore, with all her Black privilege, still died, how much more the rest of us need to use our voice? We can't mistake it.
When I hear you share that story, Tricia, I hear you on it not being conscious, but at the same time, I want to submit to you that I think that the diagnosis in medicine and the treatment comes through racist lenses.
Absolutely. I'm not saying no.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree.
Right. Because there's a racist, even if it's unconscious, but they were taught from the books. You are taught as a doctor to automatically believe that because you check these boxes off and you're a Black person, then that means that there is this underlying condition, which you definitely don't show any, except for the pain. So that really, it's just.
I'm not saying it's right. Right?
No, we didn't say you said it's right.
No, I know you didn't say that. I'm just trying to explain it, not to justify it.
Right.
I'm trying to explain it, not to justify it. When I went to school in the 80s, all the medications were measured by white 70-kilo male.
Right.
Because that's where they did the studies. And it wasn't until they started prescribing some medications to Black populations that they saw that even though this medication was good for white people, it was doing nothing for Black people. But since most Black people were not part of the clinical research, then it wasn't even evaluated in them before it went out to market.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
Okay? So that's why I'm saying this takes everything. This can't be just, oh, my son needs to be a doctor, my daughter needs to be a nurse. We need chemists, we need immunologists, we need lawyers, we need journalists, we need educators, we need social workers. You can't just say that because you're Black, there's only one thing. We don't need only hoopers. We don't need only singers. We
Right.
need the whole broad spectrum. We need them in STEM. We need the girls in STEM.
Right. And we need them to network.
Yes.
We may have them there, but if they're not willing, something very important, that self-sacrifice of coming together, then it's not going to happen. Dr. Chivas, I see Brenda responded to you here saying that Black Americans were taught to distrust other Blacks that didn't fit the mold. Back to your that experience that you shared. Glenda Nicholas says here that she got rid of her doctor because the doctor thinks that because I am Black and heavy set, I should have high blood pressure. She wants to know how come I am a big girl, as she stated, and I don't have the diagnosis. I asked too many questions. She was not happy that she didn't have to give me poisons to take. I am looking for a new doctor that is concerned about me and nothing else. You got to do what you got to do.
I agree.
You're educated on your body. Very good. So, Dr. Lona, I think you were the only one that were not able to give like a final comment.
No, I mean, I think that all of the things that were said are very valid, very relevant. I think that there is so much work to be done. And, you know, it does definitely feel overwhelming at many moments. But I think that the important takeaways are, I think that one, you know, as I tell my patients, no one loves you more than you.
Yeah.
So, you know, very important to, you know, make sure that, you know, you are thinking about, you know, kind of your own health and the things that you can do to advocate for your health. Right. I think that when you have power, you bring someone else with you. And so I think that that's very important. So that speaks to the professional networking. It speaks to also the interdisciplinary networking, you know, and then also thinking through, you know, also how do you bring, you know, someone who maybe is not as informed, you know, along with you from a patient advocacy standpoint, or, you know, encouraging others. I think that also, you know, as Black women, we have to make sure that we're not approaching healthcare from a place of fear, because, you know, the studies were not done in us. And, you know, the reality is that also now at this point, we don't want to be in the studies either. And there's very valid reasons for that, but it continues to hurt all of us. You know, I think that, you know, one of the things with the COVID vaccine has been exactly that, you know, I mean, my parents were petrified that I got a dose. And, you know, even still now that they're eligible, they've still been kind of playing chicken with getting a dose. And I said to them, I said, you don't want to be in a position where, you know, where people are starting to, you know, like where they start regulating the dose and, you know, you can't get it. And it's funny, I saw an article in the Washington Post where they're now talking about, well, maybe they can give people half a dose of the Moderna because there was some evidence that suggested in people under 55 that you could do half a dose and it might be equally as efficacious, which is exactly what I said to my parents. I said, watch. I said once, because I said the government is going to botch this rollout. Yep. And I said, then they're going to start playing around with it. And I said, and we're going to get the short end of the stick. But, you know, I was talking to someone who I know very, you know, well, who's well educated, has a great platform, and, you know, is a Black woman. And she said, gosh, you know, I mean, I get the marketing of why they're showing all these Black people getting the vaccine, but isn't that really, you know, doesn't it feel suspicious? You know, she was like, I don't see any white people on my timeline getting the vaccine. And I said to her, I said, remember, it's always the perspective of your spheres of influence. What I can say to you is that 90% of the people on my timeline who have gotten the vaccine are white. And she was like, really? And I said, well, right. Because I said, the reality is that while in my social interactions, my timeline is full of Black women, I mean, my professional interactions are full of white people. I was like, only 2% of doctors are Black women. So I was like, if I'm going through my interactions with physicians, I was like, most of my timeline are white people. So I said, right now the vaccine's going to physicians mainly. So, yeah, I was like, almost everybody I know who's gotten the vaccine so far is white. So I said, you know, so I said, I think that it's important to just make sure that we're not only seeing one side of the narrative, because, you know, a story can look very different depending on who wrote it and which side of it you're seeing.
Yeah. And I do think that, again, the research you can go online and research what the mRNA does. And basically, it's not a live virus that you're getting, which has a different activity and so on. So we need to, because we need to be protected. It has shown high effectivity. I think that's important. It's not a live virus. It does not go into the DNA, as some have purported. It does not go into the DNA. It's actually outside of the nucleus of the cell to make those proteins that will attack the spikes of the virus and basically kill it, sort of put it out of action. So we need to really do the research and not be afraid to get it, because we don't want to be wiped out. So we got to really make sure that we can educate as many folks as possible to do this. We need to do this. I think it's important that we let people know the virus is safe. In pregnancy, I've seen my share of pregnant women with COVID. It's sad. Thank God we haven't lost any, but it's sad. To intubate a pregnant woman, it's horrible. And then to take her baby out early because we need to get more aggressive, it's a horrible thing. H1N1, when it came out, there was a patient who was kept on life support until she was 34 weeks. And then they did a post-mortem. It means that she's died, brain dead, did a post-mortem C-section on her because now the baby was okay to be outside of mom. That's crazy. That's ridiculous. And so we need to really say, okay, yeah, there's a lot of things maybe we don't trust, but let's go on this, because you know what? They're getting it. Yeah. They don't want to die. Yeah. They're not going to do anything crazy to their bodies. So we're okay to get it.
Yeah, I am so glad that you're bringing both of you as an advocate of this too. There's a question here that we want to end with this question. This person said she heard on the news a while back that if you're highly allergic, you should not take the COVID-19 vaccine. What is your take on this?
Again, I think also, and Dr. Gordon can also speak to this, there are some people who are allergic to eggs and seafood and so on. And yeah, they probably don't. One of the things I will say, and people could look this also up, ivermectin, an antiviral, anti-parasitic drug that Tricia knows about that, I'm sure, is also very effective. Okay, it has an antiviral which they use in HIV, and has kept the viral load. This actually, studies have been done, tons of studies have been done on this, where it actually can kill the virus also. So there are it's a 3 milligram dose per day of ivermectin as a prophylaxis to prevent and even to cure. So if someone is, and the side effects of ivermectin, I think nausea and maybe fatigue or something. I mean, it's very minimal. So even if you have allergies to seafood or eggs or whatever, and you can't do the vaccine, think about ivermectin. Tell your doctor. It's not that everywhere is carried.
And let's remember that there haven't been that many people who have had allergic reactions to the vaccine.
That's true.
Much less than the general public have allergies to peanuts, sesame seed oil. So the amount that have had severe allergic reactions are very
few. Very.
And then our choice can be between, if you get the virus, can you die? Yes.
Yes.
If you get the vaccine, can you die? So far, no.
Yeah.
So I you're on a high risk group,
right? I would say that, remember that they said severe allergic reactions.
Exactly.
So I am allergic to 200 pages, over 300 allergens. I'm a highly atopic person. I have very bad asthma, very bad allergies, very bad eczema.
And you cook it, and you got it.
I did allergy shots for over 14 years of my life, and they were not completely effective. My doctor wants me to get back on allergy shots, but I have had anaphylaxis before when being tested for allergens, and I still got the vaccine because I've never had an allergic reaction to a vaccine.
And you were fine.
So I've never had an allergic reaction to PEG, and I had no symptoms of an allergy. The other thing to think through is that you're primed in a first dose.
Mhm.
So the first dose is 50 something percent effective. So in theory, if you don't have reason to believe you would be allergic to it, and you maybe were allergic to a component of it, it may not affect you the first time. So you would get partial protection at least. So I think that those are all things to think through. I think that, again, people don't realize that, and it's because this is a publicized vaccine. Nothing has happened to anybody with the COVID vaccine that does not commonly happen with vaccines. And all of these things, as Dr. Tricia said, have happened at far lower rates than have happened normally with published vaccines. People do get bad headaches with vaccines. People do get fevers with vaccines. People do faint with vaccines. People do have allergic reactions with vaccines. Pediatricians give vaccines all day, every day. This is what happens with vaccines. It's part of the body working the way it's supposed to in a vaccine.
So you're not getting the disease. And that's what a lot of people counsel on who don't want to get the vaccine. You can actually even, just as the last, in pregnancy, it is safe because it's not live. It's also practical safe for breastfeeding. You can breastfeed with it. So,
yep. I have two former co-residents who are pregnant who got the vaccine. Wow. I have multiple, colleagues who are breastfeeding who have gotten the vaccine.
We thank you so much for this, and thank you for this last push. We could have this conversation for another hour. I mean, you have brought such a wealth of information, but also such a rich conversation. And where do we go forward with this? What do we need to do as a collective in those in healthcare, but also us as patients? What do we do? So cannot thank you enough, Dr. Gordon, Dr. Chivas. We hope that this is not the last time that you come on. Hope to bring you on again. I mean, I know I'm going to revisit it again. There's just a lot of wisdom shared, a lot of practicality. And we want to thank you so much for that. And thank you for coming to the Pink Room. And Shonda and Tricia, thank you once again. Unfortunately, our hostess had to leave, Teresa. But we're going to end today. I'm going to on-screen us, and we're going to end with a little message from some very well-known women of color who are going to remind us of who we are. And once again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hey, Queen. Hey, Queen. Hey, Queen. Sister.
Girl, you've done it again. You are constantly raising the bar for all of us and doing so flawlessly.
You do know that you're that girl, right?
I hope that when you wake up in the morning and look in the mirror, you see how divine you are.
Know that so many people want what you got.
You have dreams to fulfill and promises to yourself that you must keep.
I know at times you feel underappreciated and misvalued. Trust me, we've all been there.
So it's necessary that you can count on yourself.
Now, don't go seeking perfection.
Extend yourself a little grace.
Don't be afraid to celebrate the little wins as much as the big ones.
You, Miss Thang, are courageous. You are dynamic. You are principled.
So, baby girl, just remember, respect is a minimum.
There's a sweet justice in knowing that the path you are on was designed for you and you alone.
Doing right by yourself never goes out of style.
Everything about you is majestic and a force to be reckoned with.
Trust me, people are paying attention.
You're special and worthy of praise. Don't shy away from it.
And you don't have to get your groove back because guess what? You never lost it.
It's also important to rest. Make sure your hustle doesn't get in the way of your health. Girl, take care of yourself.
And the next time you want to second guess yourself, don't do it.
So pause for a second right now and relax, relate, release.
You are needed. You are appreciated.
Girl, you make me so proud. And I love you.
Remember,
you are 100%
that queen.
Oh, yes.
And we'll see you next time in the Pink Room.
The Pink Room is a produced resource of For Real Women International, Inc., a non-profit organization with headquarters in New York and affiliates in the United States, Latin America, and the Caribbean. The views expressed here by hostesses and guests do not necessarily represent the philosophy of For Real Women International, its affiliates, members, and board of directors.